Welcome along to Point Blank Music School here in London, where today we are joined by the founder of Funktion One, Mr. Tony Andrews, who is here to participate in this instalment of our Masterclass series. Funktion One is a name that's become pretty synonymous with club culture. For DJs, club owners and clubbers alike, they are pretty much regarded as second to none when it comes to big sound quality. Tony is here to give us a bit of an insight into the world of Funktion One, and also to kind of talk to us about the importance of sound in all that we do, really. We're also going to be putting your questions forward to Tony, so make sure you get involved in the chat room and get posting in there. And if you do want to learn a bit more about sound engineering, about music production or DJing, then head over to pointblanklondon.com and check out some of the courses that we offer. Without further ado, let's get into it and give it up for Mr. Tony Andrews.
Oh, no.
Welcome along, Tony. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Pleasure.
The first thing I thought...
Nice to see you.
The first thing I thought I should probably ask you about is kind of where it all started for you, really, and how you became kind of, fascinated with sound and kind of building, speakers.
Okay. I was nine years old, and my mum had just bought Elvis Presley's "You Ain't Nothing But a Hound Dog," and put it on the. I suppose we were a bit posh then. We had a radiogram, and anyway, she put this music on, and I just felt all this electricity going through me, tickling up and down my spine, and I realise now that was my first taste of rock and roll, and audio. I just felt this incredible excitement and energy from it. So I was there. I was listening to music quite hard from that point onwards. I guess the next significant thing is the late '60s, with Jimi Hendrix arrived, and a number of other things. So for me, it's always been about the mental space of sound. I mean, we do have stereo, and we learnt to use it. We'd, should we say, enjoy ourselves together and lie down in between the loudspeakers and just watch all the action inside your head. I mean, it was a time that was the time. So that's what got me into it. The fact that it's so stimulating, and it's something that once you've felt it, there's not much going back, really. So that's how I got into it.
From a very early age, there was an instant kind of connection.
Yeah, absolute connection. Well, with music, I guess sound's obviously inherent in that. That came a bit later.
So how did you go from that time of being kind of really fascinated by it, but not, actually getting involved in the building and in the kind of the more science behind that? How did that evolution kind of come about? I
suppose, I definitely wanted a stereo.
Yeah.
I'd worked that much out. So at the time, there was UK had a lot of loudspeaker manufacturers. Quite a lot of them gone to China now. But so I just bought some speakers and built some boxes and put them in. And that was a way to get a hi-fi system reasonably cheaply.
Yeah.
So that's what kicked it off. I've got quite an aptitude with carpentry, things like that, so it all came naturally, really. Keep going.
And how about Funktion One as it is today? Is there a kind of how did you start that part?
There's probably more important things to talk about than how I actually got into it. But come the late '60s, we were fascinated with bands. I was working with Hawkwind and the Pink Fairies. Hawkwind were the support band. Pink Fairies were the major item, but in fact it worked out the other way in the long term. And we've got this pretty rudimentary equipment at the time. And I'm thinking what we need is the sound from a live band to be like I'm hearing on the hi-fi. And really we don't have much in the way of loudspeakers. I mean, there was a WEM column, which actually was not a bad speaker, which was four 12s with parasitic cones in the middle, so for high frequency. All time aligned, of course, because they're all the same speaker, all in the same place, and there were no separate tweeters or anything. So that was what was there, and we realised we'd seen stuff from Vitavox and RCA. They were doing horn-loaded equipment, and that quite intrigued us. So we started investigating horn loading. And to cut a long story short, I was out touring with bands for quite a while, and then all the time though we're starting to build our own equipment, and we're actually beginning to rent that to the bands. And so we were a rental company up until about 1982. And we think about that time, we realised that some of the designs we'd come up with were very good, and if we didn't actually start making them, then somebody else would. So that's what kicked Turbo Sound off. And I've always been very much engineering based, so I wasn't, how can I say, aware of the skullduggery that goes on, which people call business.
Yeah.
And lost control of the company. And well, come '92, we had to reinvent ourselves, and that's how Funktion One arrived.
And so, about Funktion One as it is today, what is it that, you know, we kind of talked a bit in the intro about it being so synonymous and so kind of highly regarded. What is it that makes you guys and the work you do stand out kind of head and shoulders above the rest of the manufacturers out there?
We do things differently, and always have done. The status quo, if you like, was, if you like, large format compression drivers, and then some sort of bass that was also doing a bit of mid-range as well. And that's what the horn-loaded stuff was like, the Perkins bin, the RCA stuff. And we realised that there was nothing really in the vocal range. I mean, compression drivers, you can run quite low, down to about 800 hertz, but I mean, they sound like death. And we pretty soon realised that cone loudspeakers were a nice thing. You know, they had a much nicer sound as far as mid-range goes. And I guess it was sometime in the late 70s, we just came up with a loading technique for cone drivers, which we've carried on evolving since probably about 77. And we are still finding more in the technique. We're still understanding how to see. The thing is you're trying to get a diaphragm to connect with the air, and the impedance mismatch is huge. In other words, take a solid object like my hand, and I can feel the air just about. It doesn't pay much attention. So when a speaker cone's moving, the air just gets out of the way. It doesn't take up the energy. When you put horn in front of it, it holds the air in. It holds it in front. You can't actually. It can't escape. So horns are typically up to about 30% efficient, whereas direct radiators, the best ones in the world, are only about 4 or 5%. So speakers like these, they're all around us. I mean, they're convenient, but actually their conversion of amplifier energy into acoustic output is really quite bad.
So they're just kind of highly inefficient.
Very inefficient. And it's mostly to do with the fact that the air, because of the impedance mismatch. So in a way, a horn is a transformer. And we've always worked with horns because it's just seemed crazy to me to not use the most efficient way of doing something. It's hard to get horns to sound nice, because as soon as you do it, you get that. And I suppose that's been one of the things we've been working on all this time. And as the product gets better and we get used to it, we get better. We get better at understanding what we're hearing. So eventually you find yourself standing in a new place where you can see what you couldn't see before. This is, I think, is called progress and advancement. And so you keep striving. And I suppose I'm one of those sort of people that all the time the surf's up, I'm going to get out there and try and deal with it. And you know, the age I am now, yeah, I'm feeling, you know, you wear out, everything wears out on earth, doesn't it? It's a fact of it. But I'm also understanding more than I've ever done before. So, you know, I'm just keeping going, really. And we're not far from a whole new level of product, which has kind of emerged. We seem to have 10-year cycles. In the beginning, it was the 70s, and then we did the TMS series, and then we did flashlight and floodlight, and then we did resolution. And after flashlight, I remember telling Anne, I don't think I'm going to be doing any more. I can't see how I can get better than that. Well, we seem to be 2 stages beyond that thought, so I've kind of given up saying that now. I just don't know what's over the next horizon. But I guess if you keep going forward, you're gonna find it. So to actually answer your question, we use cone drivers where most people are using large format compression drivers. They used to be aluminium diaphragms, which are probably nicer than titanium, but titanium's very, very tough. So, but the thing is, it's metal. And there's a thing about how fast sound will travel, the speed of sound in various materials. And for instance, linen domes, doped linen dome, which they tend to use in studios, is the speed of sound through it is almost identical to the speed of sound in air. So if it's faster, as it would be in titanium, the sound cannot get out of the material quick enough so it doesn't radiate, it reflects back internally, and this interferes with the next set of waves, if you like. And so that's why metallic things sound like metallic things and wooden things sound the way they do, because of the speed of sound within the material. And you know, a metallic diaphragm is not a very nice sounding thing. And then you squeeze it through what they call a phase plug. Have you guys all seen a phase plug? Have you seen a cross section? Do they teach you about Pro Tools?
I think we kind of focus more on logic here, but there are engineering. Is any of you guys studying sound engineering at the moment?
So it's all about logic, okay. So you don't actually know anything about loudspeakers then? Well, no, hang on, that's a bit of an assumption.
I worked in a hi-fi shop for a few years, so I know a little bit about loudspeakers, but not quite to the level that you're explaining.
God, I've hardly scratched it. Trying to keep it simple. Oh, sorry about this. So Logic, yes, that was probably the best sequencing program some years back, and then they sold to Mac, didn't they?
That's right, yeah.
And became inaccessible, unless you were in the Mac world. Okay, well, do you know the fundamentals of how it all works? You know, there's there's a sequencer, samples, sound card, maybe a crossover amplifier, then to a loudspeaker. Okay. So any clues about how a loudspeaker works? In terms of, do you care? Is it important? It probably is important because it's one of the areas where there's the most progress to be made. They've always been the limit on everything. You can have amplifiers with a THD of 0.001% disappearing into infinity. Very low distortion levels. Loudspeakers are full of it. They're completely non-linear most of the time. So my job all this time has not been so much of making it better or pushing it forward. It's just trying to get crap out of the story. Because if you push it, I mean, these speakers here, if you show them more than probably 300 or 400 watts, they'd all start making that awful sound they make, you know, where it starts to rag out. And that's not audio. I mean, that's just a noise. So it's all about trying to get high levels of sound with as low a distortion as possible, really. I think that's been our objective. Because if you're going to have loud sound, then it better be clean. Because square waves and clip signal and all the other things that come into it are pretty horrific, actually, especially at loud level. And I think one of the things for me is that because I find deep listening a meditation, and all the things that come with a meditation, you find yourself running for cover when it's distorted, not clean, or out of balance. You know, spectral imbalance is quite common these days. People getting used to what they work with. So when I was mentioning about how I reckon when we advance it and then we start living with it, we get reprogrammed. In other words, and one of the tests we use is a track that we may have played 1,000 times, and you play it, and then suddenly you hear something in the echoes or an instrument that you hadn't quite heard before. You know that you're getting to, shall we say, a deeper and a more accurate representation. And I mean, there's always been hi-fi nuts in the world, but I think it's become really important because of the amount of audio that's now in our lives, the strength of sound in clubs, and some of the things we see as we, you know, when we go various places around the world, and you see the same old stuff going on. DJs, you know, they will rock up with MP3s.
Yeah, I was just about to ask you about this, the digital age. You know, you've obviously been in the game a long, long time, and you've seen that move away from vinyl. You know, the kind of format that you know, used to at one point be the DJ's choice, and now we're seeing a lot more DJs using digital files and MP3s rather than WAVs. You know, is that something you feel strongly about?
Well, absolutely, because, and I'm known for it, because I think we got to one club opening too many where, you know, we'd made a really nice job. I've been playing me Diana Krall and George Benson and you know, some of the older dance tracks like Gap to Chord Passion or something, and it was all really nice. DJ come on and it would be a nightmare. We even had club owners ring up and saying the sound system's broken. Actually, it's not the sound system that's broken. The DJ is
broken.
Well, they don't have a good reputation in the engineering world, that's for sure.
Yeah.
And we're think, well, rather than getting pissed off about it, we've got to change this, because I can see what's wrong here. I mean, it's not purely MP3s, it's the whole digital thing where, oh look, we're all digital, everything's perfect now. Actually, that's completely wrong. In fact, it's worse in some ways, which is why, I mean, when's it's been coming in since the 80s? I mean, since CDs arrived. And it's still a debate.
Definitely.
And how long's that? It's 25 years later, vinyl's not been kicked out.
No.
And I'm wondering why this is, because digital is fully capable of being as good as analog. There's no doubt about it. I've heard it, and it is, in some ways it's better because you don't get the crackles and the pops.
That's right, yeah.
And you know, and the hiss. But analog is, well, to all intents and purposes, timeless. There's no variance in latencies or things that have to happen, shall we say, bang on. Analog is always straight. It might have, you know, might get a bit fuzzy at the edges. Say the highs and the lows are not quite as extended, but it's never out of time. And a good friend of mine, Dr. Peter Lennox at Derby University, pointed out that they'd done some tests whereby they wanted to know how much something had to move before you'd notice that, sorry, a sound had to move before you would notice that it had actually moved. And it turns out to be as little as 1 or 2 degrees. Now, if we go with the interoral time arrival between the 2 ears as how we know where something is, I don't think that's the only way we do it, but, you know, that's for somebody else to find out and prove. But typically, the directionality comes from the difference in arrival times. So 1 or 2 degrees actually represents an interoral arrival time of about 15 to 18 microseconds. So that's 15, 18 millionths of a second. So typically delays are measured in milliseconds, but hearing is good down to microseconds. And probably the historical reason is because let's say we were on the plains of Africa at some stage, and you know, half the time it's dark, so eyesight's not particularly good, and a whole bunch of other time we'd be in the jungle. So hearing became a really important part of our survival mechanism, and the ability to know what direction a sound was in became, well, it's part of survival. It might be about to kill you, so you need to know which way to run. So the incredible, shall we say, fine-grainedness, the resolution that we've got with time is actually beyond most digital equipment to get it all arriving in a straight line, if you like. So the analogy I would use is if you take a colour picture and you haven't registered all the colours quite correctly. I've actually got a picture of this on a USB stick, but we haven't got a way to project it. But essentially, you'd get, you know, if everything was in sync, you'd see a hand. But if it's not in sync, you're going to get that ghosting around the edges, and that's how it is with audio. So take like what you got here, a Pioneer 800, is it? No, it's a Behringer.
Yeah.
My God. Let's just say there's digital equipment out there where you listen to it, it sounds wrong, but you don't hear particularly any distortion. You can't really put your finger on why it sounds wrong. I think it's to do with time. I don't think all the frequencies are arriving bang on at the same time. And with time appreciation, as fine as we got, it's the brain. Well, the ear picks it up and the brain processes it, and the brain says, "Well, this is a smeared transient. Mm-hmm. This is not intact. It means it's a long way away." And if you listen to a line array, for instance, you get a whole stack of arrivals because you're listening to so many different speakers at once. There's a whole line of the things, and they're all slightly different. And in fact, one speaker to the next is enough time difference to start to give you this disengagement. Because intact transient means that the sound is close to you. It hasn't had a chance to reflect off anything. It hasn't lost its high frequencies over distance. I'm going from one thing to another here, but I'm trying to get the size of this picture for you because it's really, really big and doesn't get thought about much. So a lot of digital stuff, I feel, is not bang on in time, and that's what makes it sound digital, or part of what does. The analog circuit would be a lot simpler than a digital circuit, because you've got in digital gear you've got clocks, you've got converters, both of which are really hard to get right, and to have a really good one is typically very expensive. A good, clocks have got jitter, and there's not very many good DACs around at all, and it's not even necessarily price related either. It's just how many things the designer or the manufacturer thought about. And in fact I'm sitting here trying to get all these ideas over, and I shouldn't be at all. And it's the marketing from the manufacturers that have totally confused everybody. None of them tell the truth, as far as I can say. Well, I mean, how can everybody's stuff be the best in the world all at once? I mean, for a start, you know, it's quite nice when people say that we probably do that, but then we've spent 45 years trying to get it right, and actually we do it because we love it. And I think the things that have made me the person I am, I want to share with other people. And it's not going to happen if we're using MP3s, lousy sound cards, and all the nonsense that passes for audio gear these days. But it's okay because it's digital. It's not. And yeah, I know it's put all sorts of possibilities in the hands of the people, which is fantastic. Sequencers and samplers did that. I mean, that's how house music got born in the early mid-80s.
The accessibility of it.
Yeah, that's fantastic. But sadly, sound quality's gone through the floor. And I suppose in the old days, the equipment was quite expensive. I mean, a 24-track tape machine was a serious thing. It needed a person with it just to keep all the heads lined up and everything working nicely. And so what you'd get is rather like a racing team. You know, there's a very tight-knit group of people get round one of the Formula One teams, and they're specialist people who are just into what they do. And that's how it used to be in recording studios, like Olympic studios or Air studios. Or there was a team of guys who really honed it and knew exactly what every mic in the drawer did, what qualities to use. If somebody came in with that kind of voice, they'd get the right microphone for them. They'd know where to put the mic to get it to get the best out of the drums. I know you've got it all on samples now, but people still do live work, and rather than reaching for the plug-in or the EQ, you go and move the microphone. Because one of the things about this is, the fewer amount of stages you introduce, the better your audio is going to be. Every generation or every stage is potentially a bring down of that immediacy. And I think, well, I mean, our hearing is amazing, and we don't really do it justice. An MP3 certainly doesn't. I mean, we've tried to quantify things, and we reckon that 96 kilohertz, 24-bit depth is probably, you're not going to see the joins or hear the joins at that point. It's very smooth. So I haven't done the sums on that, but I mean, it's quite a lot. It's about 2,500 kilobits a second. But I do know what it is for CDs, which have been, well, if you like, a standard. They're 1,411 kilobits per second. An MP3 a good one is 320. So already a CD is 5 times more information than an MP3. And that's the so-called high quality. There's nothing high quality about an inadequate amount of information. So if we want to get to really up to what ears can deal with, it's got to be something in the order of 2,000 to 4,000 kilobits per second. And so CD is 1,411. So it's pretty obvious that it's going to make all sorts of arbitrary decisions about what stays in, what doesn't. Once it's below a certain level, it just ignores it. So you don't get all the subtle harmonics that make the richness of a sound. You lose I mean, when I'm listening to an MP3, what I hear is bass that's got a pretty insipid impact. There's no follow through, there's no sustain, and the extension's not there. Voices can sound like they're underwater. If you've got something simple, like like a minimalist track, then it's not too bad. But as soon as any complex material, it just scrambles it, and the high end is completely unspeakable. It sounds like crisp packets being crunched up. It's not translucent. It's not open. So there, I mean, that is something that people can easily do something about. You don't have to use such low resolution files.
Definitely.
I mean, I know they cost 60p more or £1 more, but well, just choose more carefully what you know. It's not about quantity; it's about quality. So,
and if you have a passion for music and you are a DJ, you should be willing to stump it up and.
Well, I think certainly if you're a professional and you're getting five grand a night upwards, I think you owe it as a duty of care to the audience to be playing, sounds that are properly up to it. People do want it, otherwise we wouldn't be successful. We had to reinvent ourselves, and the market had become somewhat saturated the second time round. When we started, nobody was doing it apart from some of the older American companies and a few in the UK. Now there's a lot of sound companies, and I forgot what I was going to say then. Can you?
Yeah, I mean, to kind of move along, I also wanted to talk to you about space and about whether you think that the more these days kind of architects or designers and club owners are taking their space into account and the properties of that, when thinking about a sound system.
Yeah, they are more now. People are realising, and that's we do give a lot of advice around the world, and probably the first or the second thing we ask them is, have you thought about the surfaces in this room? Is there going to be any sound treatment? They've all got the interior designer who seem to make a point of knowing nothing about audio. And same for architects, frankly. Although I think they're getting there. And it's easy to do. I mean, as colourful and nice as this wall is, if you had a row of curtains across it, like nice plush velvet ones with folds in, it would transform the sound in here. It's not hard to make surfaces absorbent. Whereas, with people, they want to use stainless steel, they want to use glass, they even want to put ceramic bathroom tiles on the floor. I mean, and it's like a glorified toilet. Yeah. It's also a slip hazard, not to mention murder on your feet if you're dancing. And so, insanity rules most of the time. Yeah. But we get used to it, and we tell them about it. And so, if you want to do something with the ceiling, just put up something. It doesn't even have to be any thicker than that. Like Arabian style in the ceiling. Transform it.
So just a little bit of consideration goes a long way. Absolutely.
And we've been working closely with Space for 10 years, and over that time, they've got a guy from Barcelona who comes in and does sound treatment. And I think 2 or 3 years ago, they said, "Well, look, we've had this sound system for 7 years. We want to do another one. We want to move it on. We want to raise the game." So I said, "Well, we can do something, but you're going to have to meet us halfway. You're going to have to do something about this roof. Because I'm standing here talking to you right now, we're in the club, and we've got a tiled floor, which is fair enough, you've got to keep it something that keeps clean." And it was kind of strange, because it's rather as it is in here, I wasn't getting full range reflections. What I was getting was mid-range, low mid, coming back to me. And I said, if you fix this ceiling, this room will sound loads better. We can only do so much with a sound system. Yeah. The space has to be, the best place to listen to audio is outside.
Okay. I was going to ask my next question. Yeah. Do you have, like, when you think of an ideal space, and do you have something in mind, to listen to music, and what would be the characteristics of it?
Well, either a padded cell or outside. Really, everything else is prone to reflections. See, high frequency reflections are most destructive to the stereo image. So They're quite easy to stop as well because they're very low energy compared with bass. See, that's another thing. Whoever says about, you know, you draw a parallel between light and audio, and you've got the rainbow, which is seven colours. That's, if you like, an octave. Probably goes on repeating. Well, of course it does, because it's part of the electromagnetic spectrum. And you've got audio, which is 10 octaves. So it's, and the difference in wavelengths. So you've got a light bulb, you can get white light. It's easy. Quite a narrow band. Audio is 10 times wider than that. That's why there are bass speakers and maybe dedicated mid-range and tweeters, because the mechanical requirements to do wavelengths of such hugely different sizes are completely different, which is why it gets split up. And this is actually key to a lot of things. So typically a bass wave is going to be, it could be anything up to 60 or 70 feet long. We're talking about one sinusoidal take, and height, 16 kilohertz or so is, I don't know, it's about that long, sort of half a centimetre, half a centimetre. So that's a couple of orders of magnitude difference between the length of a bass wave and a high frequency wave. And so you have to, well, you don't have to, but there aren't many speakers that can do a decent job of the whole spectrum out from one unit. So you tend to split it into, they used to call them woofers and squawkers and tweeters, and now it's, I don't know, it's bass, low mid, high mid, and say top. As soon as you do that, your sources are now split. So a crossover point where both devices, so say like a bass speaker at the top of its range is also doing what the low mid speaker is doing at the bottom of its range. So unless you've got a brick wall filter like this, and believe me, we've tried 48 and 96 dB per octave filters, and they do not sound nice. I don't know why, so we're kind of stuck with 24, which gives us an overlap. You have to get the overlaps absolutely in sync. And when you're directly in front of it, you can get everything arriving. Remember, we've got this time appreciation. You get everything arriving bang on. As soon as you go above or below, you're changing the relative arrival time. So, for instance, if you've got a stage monitor and you've got, say, a 12-inch and a 1.4 horn here, as you move across it, so your relationship to the two units changes, and that's why the feedback breaks out. And that's why most people are tending towards doing dual concentric, where the high frequency goes through the middle, like Tannoy always used to do it from the very beginning, to get that perfect point source. It's quite hard to do with multiple units. So the fact that sound is so broad gives rise to some of the complications, because we just can't use the same device for all frequencies, the way we can a light bulb for light. So we've got a sense that's not only 2,000 times faster than the visual sense, it's also 10 octaves wide, which is, gives you, so you start doing the maths and you realise that there's an awful lot of processing power involved in just listening. And Daniel Levitin, who's a neuroscientist at, I think somewhere, I think it's Quebec. Anyway, he's written a couple of books, one of which is Your Brain on Music, and the other one is The World in 6 Songs. And in Your Brain on Music, he quite clearly states that in their investigations, listening to music lights up more parts of the brain than just about anything else that you can find. In other words, there's more activity. It's obviously really important to us. It goes back, well, it probably goes back to the beginning of culture. You know, I mean, I don't know where those lines are. I don't think anybody does particularly, but it goes a long way back. Music is, and it's often fascinated me, why do we have the diatonic scale? How did we arrive at that? Why does that sound in tune and that other thing not sound in tune? And it's nobody gave us a book and say, okay, this is how it is. All this here has been arrived at over a long period of time. And the funny thing is, we all agree what's in tune and what's not in tune. So there are some things that humanity can actually agree about. I would have thought. Well, I'd say that there are other scales. There are other scales, but in terms of the diatonic scale, which is very interesting in itself, because it's not linear either. I think there's some places where the sharps and flats are missing, so say a deep thinker called Gurdjieff decided to plot this on a graph, and found that the non-linearity actually gave a 12-sided figure, and a 12-sided, a polygon. And he said that all human affairs will follow this pattern unless you put consciousness in. So, for instance, the Russian Revolution. How long did it take for it to turn into, for communism to become fascism? It took about, I think it's about 35 years. I may be wrong on these numbers, but not very long. So, because the thing about a circle, if things are naturally going in a circle without consciousness, then you reach a point halfway around where you're actually going in the opposite direction of where you started. So, without consciousness, probably most human affairs and efforts are doomed to turn around on themselves.
Yeah.
And typically, this is what we see happening. Yeah, enough said about that part. But the 12-sided figure appears. Well, we've got hours in a day, months in a year. It's quite strong. There are patterns, and they're in everyday life as well as being. They're not necessarily esoteric. They're all around us all the time. It's just about, shall we say, tuning into it.
So I was going to ask, you mentioned there briefly about the kind of effects that music does have on us and on the brain as well. Do you have any kind of thoughts on why it is that we do search out a kind of a kind of pure level of sound quality, or we're always striving for that? Is that something that, like as you mentioned, is that reason for that?
Why do we strive?
Yeah, why are we always, it is something that everyone's always looking for, louder, better quality, constantly.
Yeah, well, more's typical. I mean, that starts from year one. Oh, that was good, let's have some more of it.
Yeah.
Or bigger's better and all the rest of it. But the quality thing, I think, for me, because I found my mind going with the sound, and I was getting into a meditative condition. So the cleaner it is, the higher you can go. And when it's distorted, aggressive, antagonistic, sensationalistic, and all these things are okay in small doses. I mean, adrenaline's not. It's a lifesaver, but it's not a way of life. And I do find too much music today is on the adrenaline tip. I don't know, a clue came some point in Rome, and the guy said to me, "Yeah, I had a great time. I felt like I was struggling all night."
That doesn't sound very pleasant.
Well, no, but the music, the rhythms they're not satisfying. The sounds are definitely questionable, and having lived through the 80s and the M25 parties, and just what a great feeling. And actually, we were at Shoom two weekends ago, 25 years, and they were playing all the old tunes. And now, whether it's because those people, there's a lot of people actually younger than us. They're always younger than us now. The vibe in there was fantastic. It was rammed. Everybody was colliding with each other, but everybody was laughing about it and feeling really, really positive. And everybody was smiling. The music was nice, and the people were there to have a good time. When you've got cold, dark nasty and completely non-rhythmic, it's bloody hard to have a good time dancing. And in fact, why are people calling it dance music? It isn't dance music. You can't dance to some of this stuff. So I don't know what goes on. But it's a case of this, everything turning around into its opposite all over again. So I just see this pattern's always going on. So very current dance music's not actually that danceable in my opinion. So it was great to have an old school house thing where it is very much about the rhythm, and there's key changes, and there's a few vocals. I don't mean them shouty vocals either. I mean, you know, things about love, being nice to each other and enjoying yourself, you know. And we know life's a struggle, but do we have to have it in our music as well? Somebody told me that was a source of freedom, and that's probably why it's really worth striving to keep it pure and clean, because your mind can engage more with it. If it's covered in spiky, jagged edges, you're not going to want to go anywhere near it. I mean, you could almost say it's that simple.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's something
Keep it
where
smooth.
when you do hear in a club, you know, as you've spoken about, you know, kind of distorted and poor sound, it does make you feel uncomfortable and kind of tired, and, you know, it's unengaging, definitely. So
it does.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I also wanted to talk to you about the kind of future. You know, where do you see club sound going? You know, how do you see it progressing in the future?
Well, I mean, I'm tempted to say maybe we'll get to surround sound. I mean, there are multi-point systems now. Classic is 4-point. I mean, there's stuff to do this kind of things around now. There's ambisonic's well worth looking at.
I've seen you speak about that before, actually, ambisonic.
Well, that was Michael Gerson, who is sadly not here anymore. He's a Cambridge mathematician, quite brilliant, and he came up with ambisonics in the early 70s. And actually, we would have had ambisonics rather than Dolby Surround, but because it had been done with the British government, it was called the British Technology Group, and they're notoriously difficult to deal with. And Ray Dolby couldn't reach terms with the British government over ambisonics. So we have Dolby, which is merely a discrete system, whereas ambisonics is a kind of conspiracy of all the speakers to give you vector location, and can be really good. We've done quite a lot of experiments over the years, trying to make it bigger, but the limit is actually the speed of sound, which is too slow to be convincing. Once you get, you know, a circle bigger than probably the max you can get it up to is about 75 feet, 25 meters.
Okay.
But that's big enough for a lot of clubs.
Yeah.
So that's one direction. Quality's hopefully going to go up. I mean, there aren't really many good DJ mixers around. You know, aside from MP3s, bad sound cut. You can see what's happening here, can't you?
Yeah.
That everything. So inaccuracy breeds even more inaccuracy. And, well, if you're playing with an MP3, you won't necessarily hear the difference between, say, the Behringer
On that, yeah,
and a
yeah.
formula sound. And so one problem masks another. So one of my favourite analogies is the series of windows. You know, audio is a set of stages from the software right from the beginning of generating the sound all the way to the loudspeakers. And if you liken each stage to a window, every single one of them has to be completely clean and pure, otherwise you won't see through. You can have as many windows as you like, as long as they're acting as windows. But as soon as they're dirty, in fact, you only need one to bring the whole chain down. So this is the condition we're in, that very rarely does good sound actually happen, because it only takes one thing being wrong to screw it up. And another thing is reference. I hear these aren't bad, but I haven't really listened to any studio monitors. I don't know what people are listening to. I do know that when you try and get bass out of a little speaker and a little volume like this, it does compromise the mid-range. You can't get any speed or transient. they tend to be very slow and not show up much detail. You're relying on the high frequency unit to give you that. And then you've got this dynamic mismatch. You know, the high frequency part's very light and fast, and the woofer, if you want to call it that, is kind of slow. It's sort of lagging behind. It's not. It's almost in a different street. It's not part of the story. So we do make some small speakers, and we decided that we weren't going to try and get masses of low bass out of them, but we were trying to get everything else correct that we could within the constraints of something only that big. You have to make a lot of compromises to get bass out of something that size, and mostly it's to the rest of the range.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, shall we see if we've got any questions? Anyone in the room? Anything? No?
Yeah, sorry.
Okay.
I read an article not so long ago that was saying that the likes of Dark Side of the Moon, that kind of quality of sound will never be around anymore because of basically what you've just been saying. Would you agree, or is that a bit of a negative look on the future?
Well, it's a bit defeatist, perhaps. I mean, it would never be perhaps quite the same because of all the minute colorations that everything you can use puts into things. But that quality is more easy to achieve today than it was then, in my opinion. Because I mean, take the Echo Audiophile. A two-channel sound card costs you about €100. It's got a remarkably good DAC in it. It's they've just got it right. That's what I mean by it. Doesn't have to be expensive to be, but you need to be able to evaluate. You need half a dozen sound cards in front of you and put the same thing through each one, through some speakers that you can tell the difference. It's not easy for everybody. So, and believe me, we try not to spend all our days doing this kind of thing, but we are a place where people send things and say, does this sound any good? Because over the years Funktion One, in a way, is our commercial output, but in the core of it, there's me and 2 or 3 other guys who we've just all been together for 30 years, and we've got this thing for loudspeakers and getting good audio out into the world, and it's really strange, like being in your little world and watching the whole world change, and not for the better. Although of course it's convinced it's cleverer now than it ever used to be, but I mean that's the way it works. Everybody's far smarter than they were 30 years ago. What can I say? It's funny, you know, that creativity seems to be inversely proportional to the amount of technology available. And, you know, you can do things today that you could only dream about when I was your age. And thinking, well, you can, so why aren't people doing them? Well, I don't know, if anything, it's got narrower. So, no, I don't accept that we can never be as good as the vinyl. It was because it was a group of people who had a thing together. You know, they had a group think around audio. They had, you know, there were some very good desks around, solid state logic. Oh, blimey, I'm forgetting them all now. But it was considered to be, you know, a high state to get to was to be really, really good on audio, and it takes a long time, it seems, to learn the difference between good and bad, and to tune your ears up. And I mean, if somebody plays a frequency, I can't necessarily. I can tell you whether it's bass, mid, or treble, but I can't necessarily put my finger on what number it is. 2.4 kilohertz, for instance. I can't necessarily do that, but I can tell you if there's too much of it. And I can tell you if it's not clean. And people who are making dance music should be listening to some nice, cool jazz now and again, so that they know what a real human voice can sound like, and, you know, the basic instruments like drums and upright bass and and guitar, because in the land of electronica there's no boundaries. You know, there's no. So the thing we're tuned into is the human voice. There's 7 billion voices on the planet, and everyone's different. And what's more, you could probably recognise them all too, if you had all the time in the universe. But they're all different. We're very tuned to it because we're all talking all day long. I'm talking a lot at the moment. But when we're listening, and even down a phone, you know who it is. So learn what a good recording is. I mean, I mentioned Diana Krall, George Benson. I mean, it really helps if you like the music, of course, but you do need to know what actually good recording is. And I'm beginning to think that understanding is disappearing.
If the reference material is, rubbish, then...
Well, absolutely.
Yeah.
How can you tell? And why do you want it to be grimy and dirty? What does my nephew's broken note, okay. and he plays. I mean, no, I'm not going to go there. Personally, I don't get it. Dubstep, fantastic what they do with the bass. I love all that elastic stuff, but why can't we have a rhythm that's got something to do with human heartbeat or breathing? Or, the rhythms of the seasons, for instance, or day and night. I mean, it's all rhythm. Why have we got to break it up, screw it around? I mean, it doesn't make it easy to become part of it. And, well, there's lots more I could say on that, but probably better not.
Yeah, I mean, any more, guys?
After so many years of working with sound, how's your hearing now?
It seems to be okay.
Yeah?
I haven't got tinnitus.
Has it gotten better, or has it gotten...
No, I don't think the receptors are anything like as good as they were. The high frequencies have definitely gone downhill. But my understanding of what they're telling me just keeps going on. And it is still going on too. It seems to take a long time to get it all sorted out in your mind. Like the live engineer, the band comes on, and I look at and it looks like a guy who's like watching a tidal wave about to break over his head. Completely swamped. You have to get your mind into it. If you can't, there's a great book by Paul Stavros, who worked at Air Studios for 30 years, called Mixing with Your Mind. He really understood what an awful lot of things were about, and that meditation thing, I can't overemphasize that enough. You literally need to become one with the sound that's going on in your head, because your mind's not necessarily in your head anyway. It might be everywhere, and when you've got the medium of sound, the inside and the outside become the same thing.
Any more? Yep.
Is there somewhere that we can go kind of online to find a recommended list of equipment to use to get the best out of your audio, and recommended reading, like some of the books that you've mentioned already as well?
No, not that I'm aware of, really. There should be, shouldn't there?
There
should be.
Yeah, but we try to keep impartial about all that, about other manufacturers' stuff as well.
Yeah,
So
and
we're not going to put that on the
somebody else can do it.
Mm.
It's a bit
Yeah,
hard
yeah.
for us, otherwise it looks like we're being sour grapes or something, or partisan. But I mean, I do mention the Echo Audiophile because it's just such a good deal. I mean, you've got a lot of problems solved straight away if you've got one of those. And the thing is, it breeds things up. Once you start having this layers of nonsense, if you get them out of the way, you start hearing real sound. Then you start paying more attention, and you get more into it and more into it. It should be a growing thing, not a declining thing. And you ask me.
Why do you think there is so many bad quality systems and speakers in the world today? And why do you think it's been paid so little attention by the unions and the industry itself and
Yeah.
most DJs?
Well, actually, globally, you know, I mean, you think of all that audio equipment we've got in the back of our heads, and then you think of the average environment that just take classrooms at school, where the kids at the back can hardly hear because the walls are hard. It's never even thought about. So the fundamental problem with this is that the hearing sense is completely underrated. It's all about what you see. And so I think that's the fundamental reason.
When HD TVs came around, everybody got one. You know, so they do seem to be interested in better quality. But
Yeah, I think.
Bought labs.
Yeah.
You know, it went the other way. For some reason.
Well, you know, you wanted to squirt information round the web in the 90s. You had to have as little information as possible. So that's the MP3 was an outrageously lossy compression technique, which was justified by the time, and also storage was expensive. I mean, it's really cheap now. You know, an MP3 is about 6 megabytes maybe, and a CD quality WAV's about 60, and a 9624 is probably about 150. So that's a lot of difference. But we wouldn't like it if suddenly the world was all monochrome, or all the colours were washed out, or madly pixelated. There'd be a lot of objection because you could see it and it would be in your face. Well, that's how audio is. Well, but as long as there's some noise, people think that's good enough. I mean, not everybody. Not everybody by any means. And the people who are going to be involved in it and making it, just keep pushing it forward. I don't know what else to say. Is there somewhere I mean, somebody should do a list of really good stuff. I mean, I guess we could. And then put it out on another thing. I don't know.
But maybe that would encourage competition. Maybe people see this list and go, well, that's the stuff that's the best. We should aim to try and top that.
Yeah.
We'd be happy to publish it.
Somebody said something a long time ago to me. He said, with a great product with no marketing can fail, but a lousy product with good marketing will succeed. And that's another global mental condition, which has got a lot to answer for, actually. No doubt about that. It's what drives all the wastage in the world. One thing I did want to, it keeps coming into my head and then disappearing again, because it's quite hard to be with you right here now and then think of what I could say next. I'm still learning to do that. Multitasking. Yes, spectral imbalance is another thing that drives us crazy, especially in live world. And by that I mean, I have mentioned this before, but are you aware of the Fletcher-Munson curve? Which is, well, Mr. Fletcher and Mr. Munson, sometime back in the past, measured human hearing sensitivity versus frequency. And actually it's not linear by any means. And guess what? It has a peak at around about 4K. So 3 to 5K is a very hot area in human hearing. And when a child's baby screams, it's right in that area. So it's attention grabbing. It's very strong. You need about 10 times as much bass to make the same impression as something at between 2 and 5K, for instance. So the Fletcher-Munson curve is a curve that goes like this, and with a peak at about 4K. And it's interesting that these large format compression drivers that I already mentioned all seem to have their most, their noisiest areas between 3 and 5K. And if you like, that's the sound. So the medium has become the message, in as much as the thing that's loudest is the way everybody's mixing, whereas in fact it should be a conversation, because it's like taking the rainbow and say, all right, we've got some bass, so we've got some red, and maybe a bit of orange, then there's a huge gap, and then we start getting up to, so yellow and green, they're gone. They're hardly even in it sometimes. And then we're up to the blues, and if we're lucky, a bit of violet. So, and that's what a typical mix can sound like, a live concert. So there's some sort of muffled low frequencies, and then there's this screeching harsh noise that is supposed to be audio. And line arrays sort of became endemic about, well, I suppose in the mid-90s. And they all sound like this. There's always been a tendency to do this. Back in the old days, we used to say add in a bit of cut to the vocal. So it's not really high frequencies, it's presence, basically. It's that 3 to 5K area, which gives you the definition on intelligibility, like the T's and the K's. So all the consonants, all the defining parts of the words are in that area. So it is important, but spectral, it's all about balance. In fact, the BBC used to call their balance engineers. They were to get it right. And what we tend to find is that everything, a typical live engineer will walk in, get on his microphone, do the 1-2, and then start working on the graphic to make his voice sound all right on that PA. Well, there's a number of there's certainly one major thing wrong with that, and that is you've now tuned the PA, the whole PA, to be right for your voice, not even the singer's voice, your voice. Whereas all that should have happened on one channel. That's what the channel EQ's for. As a way of voicing a PA, I don't know how it's got such a hold, but it's completely wrong. Because everything now has got an EQ on it. I mean, if you did it on the channel, fine, because it's just on that channel. But if you do it on the master EQ, i.e. the graphics on the PA, then the whole PA is turned into something that is right for the bloke who's not even going to be singing's voice. That's really smart, isn't it? So something to say is that not many people know really what's going on with audio. Most of the live sound engineers are busking it, as we used to say. They got in there by not necessarily false pretenses, but they just went up with the band, or something happened like that. But very few of them are really any good, and that is the truth. And I'm only mentioning this because really you've got to get your own mind together. You've got to know what good sound is. You can't, and techniques and bullshit from people who actually don't know what they're talking about is all too rife in this business. It's completely insane, actually, just how bad it really is. The gigs back in the 80s were definitely more listenable than they are now, because at least it was simpler then. There's too many tools now, too many things to help it go wrong. When you put in all your effects, bloke doesn't feel right unless he's got that's why digital desks, because you can put all the outboard effects on each channel. It's all part of the DSP then. And the only reason that we ever had noise gates was to try and stop everything on stage going down everybody else's mic. That was not a bad idea, but now you have to have it on everything. Now you have to have compressors on everything. Not true. Just put everything flat and try and get the mic in the right place and do the minimum possible. And then the sound will take care of itself. Yes, so I've talked about the spectral balance thing. I mentioned that. And it's the same with productions. You don't hear much in the upper mid-range. Sorry, you don't hear much in the lower mids. You don't get any thicknesses, any chestiness in the vocal. You don't get the drum kit properly. Instead of toms being boom, 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 that's what you get now. when you're out at a concert, which I haven't been to for ages, of course, because apparently I don't get out much.
We are kind of just we are kind of running out of time a little bit. So have we got any kind of final questions in the room? No. Yep. Go on.
Did you have much to do with configuring the sound system at Berghain in Berlin?
Yeah,
It's amazing.
it's not bad. It would have been better if we could put it in the corners.
Oh yeah.
I tried to get them to do that. So you had a square room, didn't they, like this, and they got the 2 and the 2. But they wanted them there because they looked nicer.
Right.
But in the corners, the bass was way better.
Really?
Yeah,
Oh, man.
I know. This is what we have to put up with. That's not one of the bad ones, by the way. That's fine.
Well, I think we'll kind of wrap things up there.
Well, I'm fine. I'm just getting warmed up here. But I guess things to do, places to go.
Yeah. So yeah, just
Take you
trying
up
to
on
say a massive thank you to Tony. Let's all give him a round of applause.
Oh, thank you.
So yeah, a big thank you to Tony, and this is actually going to be the final masterclass of 2012. So we'll be back in the new year in January, and yeah, that's it from us. So we'll see you very soon. Thanks. Bye bye.